Well, good morning, everybody, to this COVID-safe webinar. We are broadcasting from Brussels, as you have realized. My role today is to speak about the personnel cost in Horizon 2020. It is not today's intention to go through every single small little item of the personnel cost. That will take us probably more than the triple of the time that Manuel have indicated, but to concentrate really on the main aspects to avoid that you may fall into errors when preparing your cost declarations for Horizon 2020. Actually, this morning I was updating my paper copy, can you imagine, my paper copy of the annotated model grant agreement. If you don't know why it is, don't worry, we will speak more about it in a few minutes. And I have realized that the explanations for the personnel cost take something like about 30 pages in the annotated model grant agreement. You may say that is a lot. But if you compare it with the 300 and nearly 80 pages that the full explanations on the Horizon 2020 grant agreement takes within this annotated model grant agreement, and if you think that probably around 3/4 of the cost and nearly as much of the errors in Horizon 2020 grants are concentrated into the personnel cost, probably these 30 pages, even if it takes a while to read them through, are not that big and not that much of an effort. But in any case, today, as I was saying, I'm going to concentrate on the typical issues that might raise mistakes when you are preparing your cost declarations concerning personnel costs in Horizon 2020. Let's see if we do it right. First indication. Well, if you are today or in a near future connected to this webinar, refreshing your memories of it, it's probably because you have an Horizon 2020 grant agreement ongoing. Well, the Horizon 2020 program, as you can see in the slide, ran it from 2014 until 2020. But it doesn't mean that it's over. That was the time when the program finished. But we still have grant agreements to sign, and for the next year, you will be implementing the grant agreements that you have signed until the end of the program. The message now is that remember that whatever we are going to explain today to you about Horizon 2020 does not apply to Horizon Europe. As Emmanuel explained it, you already have available some other presentations about Horizon Europe, and very soon we will concentrate on explaining what are the cost conditions, the reporting obligations, etc., for Horizon Europe in a wave of other webinars. Today is Horizon 2020, and also if incidentally you still have alive any FP7 program, the same logic applies. So what I'm going to tell you today about personnel costs does not concern FP7, does not concern Horizon Europe, it's only Horizon 2020. And even within Horizon 2020, I must say that I'm not covering everything of it, because we are going to be focusing these explanations on personnel costs in cost reimbursement grant agreements. So where you have to calculate your actual costs in accordance to the rules of the grant agreement. You may know that we have other types of grants, like the lump sum grants, which is just a fixed amount. So there you don't have to calculate how to declare your costs during the reporting, or like the Maria Sklodowska-Curie action grants, where it's a unit cost, it's a fixed amount that becomes already determined in the grant agreement, and you just use that fixed amount. So there are no complications and there are no these financial mistakes. That's the reason why today we are only working concentrated on the personnel cost in cost reimbursement grants. So the first element about personnel cost is, well, who can I declare as personnel costs in my cost declarations for Horizon 2020 grant agreements? Well, I think that the first indent is the most logic. Of course, your employees are your personnel costs. There are no doubts there. Employees, by the way, also means if you are attending this webinar from a public entity, when we say employees, it also means public servants, civil servants, sorry. So these two categories are automatically included in the personnel cost. But you can also declare as your personnel cost seconded staff. For instance, if a professor comes from a different university to work for you, if you are a university into the project, you can also declare the cost of this person as your personal cost, even if you don't pay directly this person. On top of it, if you are an SME, a small and medium-sized enterprise, and if the SME owner is participating in the project but is not an employee of the SME, so he or she does not have a salary from the SME, you can also declare the cost of these persons as your personal cost. And finally, but this is subject to conditions, you might also be able to declare as your personal cost the cost of other persons that work for you, but that are not your employees. This is the case, for example, of some types of consultants. We'll have a few words more on this in the next slides. And this is personal cost in Horizon 2020. You may think that it's horribly complex. It is, in any case, quite a dense tree of options. That's true. The reason for it is that we have had to adequate the Horizon 2020 grant agreement to the many different options and situations that take place around Europe. So the biggest difficulty when calculating your personal cost in Horizon 2020 is probably to find your way within this tree of different options. To simplify this task, we have already marked there for you what we consider to be the easiest way to calculate them. It doesn't mean that you must go down that line. You may take the other options. You will see a bit more of information about these different options in the next slides, but I will, through the other slides, all the time address you to what we consider and has proven to be the less error-prone of the options within this tree to calculate the personal cost. So don't be scared. It might look difficult, but it's because you are looking at every single possible way that you may have to calculate personal cost. And at the basis, it's extremely simple. The logic that you can easily follow is that the personal costs in Horizon 2020 are calculated simply by multiply the number of hours that the person worked in the project, in the Horizon 2020 action. And for this, you need time records. I'm going to insist several times on this, by an hourly rate, so X euros per hour. And you don't need to invent a formula for the hourly rate. It also comes within the grant agreement. So when you sign the grant agreement, in the text of the grant agreement, the explanations about how to calculate this hourly rate are already there, clearly detailed. And beyond that, you also have the detailed explanations, developments, and examples about this calculation in the annotated model grant agreement. I will keep on repeating this annotated model grant agreement several times. I will give you the link at the end in case that you don't know it. So hours worked in the project multiplied by an hourly rate. Keep this in your mind because we are going to now explain in a bit more of detail these two elements. The first, hours worked in the project. Horizon 2020, you need timesheets. You need timesheets, you need timesheets. Keep this in mind. We will keep it repeating. It slightly changes in Horizon Europe, but as you have already understand by now, Horizon Europe is going to be a different story. We'll have separate presentations, we'll have different grant agreements, so it does not concern today our presentation. Horizon 2020, you need time records. There is one exception for persons working exclusively in the action. You can read about that in the annotated grant agreement. By default, keep in mind timesheets. And you don't need to record all your hours. You just need to record the hours that the person works in the Horizon 2020 action. So it's not that we are imposing you something beyond what is necessary to calculate the personal cost. And there, in your timesheets, you cannot declare budgeted time. So it's irrelevant if at the beginning you estimated that the person will work 3 months in the project and eventually you needed 6. You cannot declare the budgeted time. You must declare the reality of the time worked in the action. Similarly, you cannot declare estimated time. So it's not about at the end of the year, well, I think that the person worked 500 hours in the project and I declare these 500 hours. It does not work like that. You cannot declare estimated time. And you cannot declare either, and this happens in some specific contracts, a percentage of the time of the person. So it's not enough to say, well, in the contract of this person, the employment contract, we have put that the person will work 25% of the time in this grant agreement. It's not enough. You need to record and declare systematically the reality of the time that the person worked in the Horizon 2020 actions. So, once again, and for the last time now, remember that you need, in Horizon 2020, timesheets for the hours declared to the grant. So the other side of the formula is the hourly rate. Now that we know how many hours the person has worked in the action, we need to determine the hourly rate. And it is the grant agreement who tells us, well, you will calculate the hourly rate by simply dividing the personal cost of the person by the number of productive hours. What you can put in the personal cost, you're looking there on the slide, is the real salary of the person, the social security contribution, taxes, and other costs that are included in the remuneration of the person that arise from national law or the employment contract. Okay? Be very careful about things like gifts or bonuses that are given not based on objective conditions, premiums, that might be delicate and in many cases might not be eligible. So keep in mind that these are the elements that you can put within the calculation of the hourly rate in the personal cost. Then we need to divide this personal cost by the number of productive hours. And you remember the tree with all the options? Well, there are 3 options for the number of productive hours. The first option, the one that we recommend, the simplest, the less risky, is 1720, so 1,720 hours per year. It doesn't matter in reality if the person actually works more hours in total than the 1720 or less hours than the 1720 in total. You can always use 1720. If the person works part-time, you will do a pro rata corresponding to the part-time. If the person is employed just for 6 months, it's going to be just half of this 1720, so also a pro rata of this 1720. But any beneficiary, any one of you can use the 1720 hours to calculate the hourly rate of the person to charge the cost to the Horizon 2020 grant agreements. It might be possible that you don't like it, for instance, because you already have your own methods to calculate annual productive hours. You're a big company or a big institution, and you have cost accounts, and you yourself said, well, yeah, I'm already doing this my way, and want to keep this system. For that is the standard. You see this option that is in your left bottom corner of the slide. And you also can calculate it person per person, taking into account the number of hours that the individual person worked during the year. We put these 2 options there, are also open. They are subject to conditions. If you don't like or you prefer not to use the 1720, please check carefully how and under what conditions you can use one of the other 2 options. Then, the next question is, now I know that I have to multiply the number of hours by an hourly rate. And how many times do I have to do this? How many times do I have to calculate an hourly rate? Well, the main, again, branch in our tree, the main option and the one that is the simplest, and because it is the simplest and the less risky, we recommend, is do it once in each financial year. So just once at the end of each financial year, you calculate your hourly rate by dividing the annual personal cost by the annual productive hours. That's very simple. Normally, you have already these global amounts because of your statutory accounts or because of the tax declaration, so it's very easy. Now, if you want, there is a small downside on this main approach, that is that when at the end of the reporting period, the financial year is still ongoing. For instance, your financial year ends in December and the reporting period ends in March, the year after. You will have to use for these last months, these months of the ongoing financial year, the hourly rate of the previous full financial year, your last closed financial year. So you will not be able to calculate hourly rates for fraction of a year, which implies that if there is a salary increase at that moment, well, it's not going to be reflected immediately in the hourly rate. It's going to be for the next reporting period when you will see this hourly rate updated, if you want. Well, there are cases in which beneficiaries told us, well, look, this is not my normal way. I want another option, or I'm not happy with this because, okay, the ongoing financial year in your example is 3 months, but it might be 11 months. And if there is a significant increase in the salary, well, we will be able to recuperate more EU funding if we will have different approaches. For instance, this second option that we have allowed now in the Horizon 2020 grant agreements, that is to calculate the hourly rate per month. So rather than doing for each person an hourly rate at the end of the year, you will do 12 hourly rates, one in each month, by dividing the monthly personal cost by the monthly productive hours. If you go down the line, if you say, well, I indeed prefer, I don't care, it doesn't matter for me all this additional administrative work because of the monthly calculations, I insist 12 rather than 1 in a year, I want to go down the line, again, please check carefully in the annotated model grant agreement the explanations for this monthly hourly rate, because there are some specific conditions that make the calculations in some cases slightly more difficult than the the calculation based on the full financial year, so more prone to errors. The option is there. We recommend you going to the annual because it's simpler, it's simpler, and it implies less administrative burden. But if you want to check the other, if you want to see how it works, the information is available in the annotated model grant agreement. Now, there are 2 ceilings that apply to your personal cost declarations. In reality, the 2 ceilings are based on the principle that the grant agreement, the grant itself, can never result in a profit for you. So we are covering costs, right? So if you are making a profit, we are going beyond what has been your actual cost. That would not be possible. To ensure that we respect this general rule of not making any profit out of the grant, there are a double ceiling on your personal cost declaration. The first side of the ceiling is that you can never declare in a year, in total, in all EU grants together, more hours than the number of hours that you have used to calculate the hourly rate, so the number of the annual productive hours. So if I took option 1, 1720, and I calculated my hourly rate based on the 1720 hours, I can never declare in EU grants in a year, in total, for that person, more than 1720. Even if in reality, for whatever reason, the person working more hours. It is irrelevant, because when you divide by 1720 and multiply by 1720 again, it implies that you have already charged the full personal cost of this person in that year to EU grants. That's the reason why, even if the person works more hours, you have to stop declaring them to EU grants. And immediately related to this, we also have the second condition that says that the total of the personal costs declared for reimbursement as actual costs in EU and Eurotown grants in a year cannot be higher than the total personal cost for this person in your accounts. So it's the same logic. You cannot make a profit, you can never declare more than the total of the personal cost of the person. After that, you may say, well, still it looks rather complex, and there is a lot of math to make these calculations, and there are the ceilings and the options, and I'm a bit scared of making mistakes and having to pay back later on. That's dangerous. Well, what we have done to help you in that situation, or for instance, it also happens that you are just a one-time participation in Horizon 2020, and you are worried that you might be missing some elements. We have prepared a wizard, so an IT tool to support the calculations that verifies automatically this double ceiling and helps you through your choices. You have there the entry point to this wizard tool, which is available at the time of your reporting, so the financial reports, okay? You see there this magic one which will give you the access to the wizard, which is not mandatory. You may use it, you may not use it, it's your choice. Eh? It's available for you. We have done it to help you with the calculations and all the conditions, but if you prefer to do it yourself on your way, on your own, not on your way, the way is the one in the grant agreement, that's fine. But if you want, the possibility is there. Now, to wrap up my part of the presentation today, we are going to tackle a few special cases with a couple of key messages. So let's imagine that you are in a situation. Here we have two persons. One is representing our side, one is representing your side. And you say, well, look, I want to pay more to my employees than the normal salary when they work in this prestigious grant. Our reply will be, well, if the only moment in which, and the only occasion in which you do that is when participating in Horizon 2020 or even in European Union grants, we cannot accept it because we want to contribute to your cause in the normal way that you do it. So paying the normal remuneration, participating to your normal policies, travels, etc. So if it is just for us, it's not possible. Okay, we will just cover up to the normal basic salary. It can be, however, that you reply, but the thing is that I always do this when it is a prestigious grant. So my internal rules go into saying that when there is an important prestigious grant, we will pay more to the person. Well then, and this is the message, it might be possible. We call this project-based remuneration, but there are specific rules that you need to apply. And if there is something that we unfortunately have to recognize that is somehow complex about Horizon 2020, is this project-based remuneration. So don't be surprised, don't be scared, but if you are in this situation, here really I must insist that you check very carefully what are the explanations in the annotated model grant agreement, and remember that you can always contact us. I'll tell you how in a couple of slides in case of doubts. Two other specific cases. Remember that I explained to you that it was possible to declare as personal cost the cost of the SME owner, so the owner of an SME who is the beneficiary, the SME the beneficiary in the grant agreement. If this owner is not an employee, in some countries it's not possible to be an employee of your own company. So if this owner is not employee but participates in the grant agreement, so works directly in the grant agreement, in the action, in the project itself, we accept that the time of this SME owner is valorized and can be charged to the Horizon 2020 action via what we call a unit cost, which actually is an hourly rate that is fixed by the Commission and that will appear directly in your grant agreement. The difference, I insist, is if it is an employee, it follows the same logic that all the other employees. If it is an SME that is an SME owner that is not an employee, then you have this unit cost, even if the person is paid by any other means, including service contracts or whatever non-employment contracts. In those situations, it's always the SME owner unit cost that applies. And finally, the last special case that I wanted to name here is the case of consultants. Remember that, as said in the second slide, that in many cases, or in some cases, you can also charge as your personal cost people who works in the project but are not your employees. They are working to you via other type of contracts, service contract typically, or any other type of labor contract, but not employment one. Well, this is possible, but it's not always, and it's not systematic. It's not because you hire a consultant on personal basis that you can declare the cost of the person as your personal cost. So here, please check the Article 6282 and the explanations in the annotated model grant agreement, because even if very often they can still be declared as personal costs, there are some cases and some circumstances under which you will have to declare them as subcontractors, worst scenario, or purchase of services. So if you have this type of consultants, be careful, check it carefully, do it right from the beginning. Don't wait for an auditor to correct you and recover the money. So this is going to be my last slide, and it is about where you can find more information about everything that I have explained and many more issues that today we didn't have the time to get into details. First message, you have heard me speaking several times about this Horizon 2020 annotated grant agreement. This is really the book where everything is explained. Whenever we have questions, we use exactly this information to reply to your questions. So same document for you, same document for us. is full of examples, detailed explanations, and it also contains the articles, so the parts of the grant agreement to which the explanations refer. It is available through the portal, and you have a direct link here in the slide. More in detail, if you want to go into details about the practical implementation, the procedures, etc., so beyond the legal provisions of the grant agreement, you have the Horizon 2020 online manual, also available through the portal, and here with the link that is in the slide. And it might be perfectly possible that after reading, it's still not clear one element or another aspect, and you want more information. It also happens to me. In that case, you can first of all contact your national contact points. These are people who is specifically dedicated in your country to reply to questions about Horizon 2020. They know your language, they speak your language, they know your particularities, and they are particularly knowledgeable about certain aspects of Horizon 2020. Your national contact points, the contact details are available also in the portal. So through this link also, and at the end you have also the possibility to contact us directly, the Commission directly, via the Research Inquiry Service, where you can submit your question, your specific question is going to get arriving to me, my colleagues, sorry, depending of the area to which the question refers, and you will get a written answer by email directly from the Commission. And this is it. I stop here with this part of the presentation. I will pass the floor now to my colleague Soren, who will speak about the audit dimension of Horizon 2020, and we will have plenty of time at the end to reply to your questions. Thank you very much. See you later.
I hope you can hear me. I will quickly present to you the audit perspective, let's say, for Horizon 2020 grants, what we see in practice and so on. But first of all, we'll go to some introduction and speak about the errors. What do they occur? Why do they occur? Of course, misunderstanding of the rules. That's the part where David kindly presented to you the bigger tickets. And then, of course, lack of attention to the detail of the provisions of the grant agreements, and there I really recommend you to go through the annotated grant agreement, read carefully, and really pay attention to the details or to the specificities you are looking for, because there are many guidelines included. And of course, intentionality as well, that can explain why some errors can occur. The consequences of error are, of course, negative ones for beneficiaries. This can be the non-optimal use of funding available, and this may lead as well to recoveries, of course. Not only for beneficiaries, for the European Commission services as well, the scrutiny that the European Court of Auditors can scrutinize the budgetary authority in charge of the Horizon 2020 actions. There could be an increased error rate as well, of course, an increased ex post audit efforts to detect such errors, and eventual corrective measures that may be applied. So this in a nutshell to speak about the consequences of errors and why we would like to avoid them, of course. Now, quickly, just to give you an idea about how the error rate is calculated, basically, from the audits that we are performing, from the population of paid Horizon 2020 grants, we are taking a sample and we calculate an error rate based on a simple calculation. Basically, we are summing up the negative adjustments from the audit, and we are dividing this by the sum of the audited amounts. The assurance elements of the audit, the main purpose of an audit is to provide assurance. Now, the assurance elements are used to assess the legality and regularity of Horizon 2020 project payments, and to also calculate a so-called residual error rate. Basically, the residual error rate is the, let's say, remaining error not detected within the audit. And the point that the objective is to keep this residual error rate as at an acceptable level. The general control objective of the control strategy is to get the residual error rate as close as possible to 2% without necessarily expecting it to get under 2%, of course. The main detected errors, so now we're trying to, we'll present to you in the slides the main detected errors during the audits that we carried out for Horizon 2020 actions. Are for personal cost especially, they are due to mainly first of all, incorrect productive hours calculation. Basically, I think we have a slide later on about this, but this is referring basically to the three options to calculate productive hours and to the correct application, especially of the second option and third one, meaning the individual productive hours or the standard productive hours, which have some conditions to respect. So therefore, either the conditions are not entirely respected or the errors refer especially to these conditions to be respected. The option one, obviously, it could be used, so we have less errors there. Regarding remuneration cost, we may have incorrect remuneration cost, like, for example, estimated cost or budgeted cost, which may indeed explain some of the errors in personnel cost. The other part is incorrect time working on the action claimed. Obviously, this is linked directly with the timesheets. And of course, all the elements explained by David, my colleague David, earlier about the timesheets should obviously be taken into account, because this may lead to errors if this is not the case. And of course, unreliable or missing timesheets, this may lead to rejection of cost or to calculation of adjustments by the auditors. Just to make sure that the personal cost is correct, so how to tackle these errors? For the personal cost calculation, the method to calculate personal cost is to multiply the hours worked coming from the timesheets with the total of personal cost, basically basic salary, social security contributions, and add-ons, to the total productive hours obtained by using the options explained earlier, 1, 2, and 3, basically fixed number of hours, individual productive hours, or standard productive hours. This second part of the equation is called the hourly rate, and basically for the personal cost, or for the upper part, we would advise to make sure that the time recording system, this is for the, first of all, for the number of hours, some advices from an audit perspective. So we will advise you to make sure that the time recording system is consistent with the human resources records, probably dated and signed, not in excess of your full-time employment, and this has to do, of course, with double sealing, with respect to double sealing, explained earlier by my colleague, and of course to have sufficient, to have the time recording sufficient in terms of information. And here you have, of course, the necessary information in the annotated grant agreement with the minimum conditions that could be included in the timesheets. For the numerator part now, for the personal cost that you can include to calculate the hourly rate, the eligible personal cost may include, as I was saying earlier as well, the brute salaries, the gross salaries, the social security contributions, the employers and employees contribution. So obviously the employees contribution is included in the gross salary. I will not enter into these details, but both of them are eligible. And taxes and other costs included in the remuneration if they arise from national law or employment contract. So these are the eligibility rules. Now, what they should not include is any ineligible item. There is a specific article, namely 6.5, which details all these ineligible items, majority of them. And any cost included in other budget cost category, obviously like indirect cost or subcontracting or travel cost, etc., should not be included again in personnel costs. So I think this is very obvious. For the denominator, so for the down part of the equation to calculate the hourly rate, the advice, as my colleague said as well, is to really use the option 1, 1,720 hours this has the less, let's say, has, let's say, the less possibility to make errors. Yeah, it's one fixed amount, you can use it, and the possibility to make errors is lower. Now, if you can use this option, if the employment contract does not specify the working time or conditions, or if the annual workable hours cannot be determined also. So you may have some specificities here. If you have those specificities, you may use also this option in addition. For individual annual productive hours, so this is this option 2 to calculate productive hours, basically the formula should be used, the formula which is well explained in the annotated grant agreement. So to calculate this annual individual productive hours by first calculating the annual workable hours and deducting, of course, absences and adding also overtime. For the standard annual productive hours, this should be, so here we have conditions obviously for option 2 and 3. We don't have all the conditions on the slide, but basically, please, if there are specificities to pay attention to are those conditions where we can use this. For example, individual and productive hours cannot be used in certain conditions and in certain circumstances and so on. For standard annual productive hours, this should be, that's one of the conditions, according to the beneficiary's usual cost accounting practices. And of course, the minimum threshold of 90% should be respected, meaning the annual productive hours are at least 90% of the standard annual workable hours. Basically, by taking out the absences and overtime, this will not be more than 10%. Now, some further advices on how to avoid errors. You can make sure that the time charged to the project is correct. Basically, all the hours that you use to calculate the personnel cost are exactly the same as what you have in your timesheets or in the time recording system, if it's an IT one. You may be amazed, we still find many differences in the time charged in audits. Time records, the second advice is that time records that you use meet the grant agreement's conditions. Basically, you have the name of the person working, the signature of the person, signature of the supervisor, etc. The number of hours, obviously, very important, worked on the project. And in the remuneration, the numerator is correct. As explained earlier, you do not include ineligible items, you only include those elements that come from the labor agreement, etc., labor contract. And then for the down part of the calculation, productive hours in the denominator are correct, meaning either you use simply option 1 and then there is nothing else to check further, or if you use option 2 or 3, you will make sure that the conditions to use these options are fulfilled. Furthermore, personnel cost formula reconciles, meaning there are no arithmetical errors still in the formulas. This may happen, this still happens, although with using IT tools, this is less and less the case, but we may still find errors there. And that transaction listing reconciles. Here, given the fact that often beneficiaries are taking extracts, what we call breakdown of cost, extracts of cost from the accounting system or project accounting system to declare this in the financial statements for Horizon 2020, there could be, let's say, some rows that are not taken properly or errors still that may happen there. Employment contracts are in place for employees, obviously. For the other type of personnel, we're not talking here because we are more focusing on personnel costs, but basically for employment contracts, if you are declaring personnel cost as for employees, you should make sure that the employment contracts are in place, of course. Also for the audit, and this you will receive anyway a list of documents to prepare for the audit in advance. And one last part, basically here, exchange rate, to ensure that the exchange rate is stipulated by the Horizon 2020 grant agreement is calculated, because you have to use a specific exchange rate. Of course, before you press the button, you do all these final checks. Now, this is only several hints and advices from an auditor's point of view. Of course, there are many more details that we see but this is to only give you an idea about what are the main elements you can do in order to avoid errors. Some additional info, some of them have already been indicated by my colleague in the previous presentation, but basically we have the Horizon 2020 Indicative Audit Program, where you can go and see what are the main checks, indicative checks that could be done in case of an audit. So there you can also test for your own situations or specific situations, or for the checks that you could do already at your level. Of course, Horizon 2020 online manual, we have a section, specific section for audit and certifications. Inside, of course, the online manual itself. And the same as in the previous presentation, national contact points or research inquiry service for any other further questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
So, dear participants, apologies for the technical issues that we had at the very start of this meeting, but also now for restarting and getting into the discussion. I hope you can bear with us, and we will now go into the replies to your questions. You also didn't hear, apparently, my introductory words, so maybe once again, very short. My name is Peter Hertwig. I am head of unit in the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation. I am here with my colleagues David Mechuto from the legal unit and Sorin Sherban from the audit unit, who have given their presentations and you have seen them. We do the discussion via Slido. If in case you haven't yet accessed Slido, please go there, www.slido.com, and introduce the code for today's webinar, which is COSTS 2020. There are already quite a number of questions, and you can, of course, also vote on the questions of others. And we will now go through the questions in the order of number of likes. And so I want to ask the colleagues in the background to start showing the questions on the screen. Okay, so we see them. The first question with the highest number of likes: can you explain the main differences between personnel costs for H2020 and Horizon Europe? And I think I give the floor to David to start replying to this.
Okay, good morning again. Of course, today's webinar is focused on Horizon 2020, so we will not get into the details of Horizon Europe rules. For that, we have other sessions especially dedicated. But if you want to have some hints about what are the main differences, well, first of all, the most evident one is that we will not be speaking anymore about hourly rates. Now it's going to be daily rates. It has some implications regarding the calculations, but basically, as you have seen during the presentations, we will keep on calculating number of days multiplied by a rate. Now Horizon Europe is going to be a daily rate rather than an hourly rate. Another big difference, we will not use anymore the last closed financial year. That completely disappears. So now the calculation of the daily rate in Horizon Europe is going to be done per reporting period. So not anymore per financial year as we were doing in Horizon 2020, not anymore with this use of the last closed financial year when the ongoing financial year is still, when the financial year is still ongoing at the end of the reporting period, as you have seen during the presentation. We will calculate daily rates per reporting period. What else? We don't have any more additional remuneration, but we will keep project-based remuneration with the specific calculation details. We don't have any more mandatory time records, but instead, either you keep time records as you did in Horizon 2020, or you will have to fill in a monthly declaration of time. So it simplifies much further the requirements for the supporting documents for the personnel cost. We still need to have something. So many of you will probably continue using time records as in Horizon 2020, at least those who are recurrent beneficiaries. But for the newcomers and for those who want to change or didn't use time records as the usual management practices in the past, it can now move into the use of these monthly declarations. I think that these are the really big issues, changes when we compare the both framework programs for the personal cost. There are other aspects, but just to give these first hints, I think that those are the most important.
Okay, thank you very much. We go immediately to the next question. If it doesn't show up on the screen, I read it from my other device. An employee works in a year 1900 hours, 1800 for the project plus 100 other activity. We use 1720 as productive hours. How many hours do I have to claim as personnel costs? David, I think.
1720. You can, if you use 1720 for the calculation of the hourly rates, you can never declare more than 1720. And the logic is very simple. It's because the moment that you divide the annual personal cost of the person by 1720 and you multiply them by 1720, you are already charging in full the annual personal cost of the person. If you would keep on adding hours, so declaring more hours into EU grants, you will be making a profit out of it. And that is not possible under the conditions for EU grants. So you would have to stop in 1720 declaring. You can have more hours in other projects, or even work more hours into the EU grants, but you simply stop declaring that there because you have already charged the full personal cost of the person in the year to EU grants.
Okay, very clear. Thank you very much. Next question. A person working exclusively on the project, can he/she calculate the costs following this formula? Total contract costs divided by person months charged to the project. David.
That's very simple. No, because it's the grant agreement which details how the personal costs have to be calculated. And precisely in Horizon 2020, remember that I say one difference with Horizon Europe is that we will not have anymore the last close financial year. But in Horizon 2020, we have it. So when at the end of the reporting period, your financial year is still ongoing, as you saw in the presentations, you will have to use the hourly rate of the last close financial year. This is set out in the grant agreement. And if you go down this other calculation that you propose, you will see that you get two differences. So if you do that way, if there is an audit, they will recalculate and readjust in accordance with what the grant agreement says, which is the mandatory calculation, and there will be adjustments and potentially recoveries. So no, just follow what we explained for the calculation of the personnel cost as defined in the model grant agreement.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Can a budget category be reallocated from subcontract to other costs without amendment? David.
Generally, if you are taking out costs from subcontracts to other cost categories, if this does not imply a change in the allocation of tasks, you could do it without an amendment. Going out from subcontracting, if there are new costs going into subcontracting, you will need an amendment. That's one of the particularities of the budget reallocations. But if it is the other way around, so having less costs on the subcontracting, and if you are not moving tasks, imagine that initially you expected to have certain subcontracted tasks, and then now it's going to be one beneficiary or a third party or whoever else that will do it, then you better discuss the case with the project officer because you likely will need an amendment. But if it's just, imagine that you for task Y, you expect to spend 10,000 euros, and eventually you see, well, I just spent 5,000 euros, that it was cheaper than what I expected, but in reality, I need more money for consumables for the other tasks. That you would not need to request an amendment.
Okay. Next one, probably for Sorin. An auditor decided that costs about seconded persons isn't personnel costs, but subcontract other service. Do I have to return the money? Sorin.
I think here maybe first of all it's important to remind the rules of each type of cost. For seconded persons, there are some clarifications in the annotated grant agreement which says which conditions this type of cost should fulfill, and for the subcontracting or other service, which conditions should be fulfilled in order for the cost to be eligible. But I think it's important in the question is for the beneficiary to first look to see to which type of cost what they're planning to request makes part, maybe either seconded person or subcontracting or other services, because the eligibility rules are different. For subcontracting, they should be mentioned in the Annex 1. There should be a procurement procedure, best value for money and so on, and for the other services as well. While for the seconded persons, the rules are a bit different. They should be calculated based on the real cost, and actual cost, and so on. So I hope this clarified the question. Maybe David, if you can complement, or thank you.
Oh, I think it's rather clear for the timing, and regarding indeed the possibility or the necessity to reimburse money, it will depend on how much you declare, what was the amount accepted. So don't be worried so far. If you have to pay back something, we will let you know.
Okay, let's go to the next one. Can we have access to the personnel cost wizard outside of an open reporting period in order to prepare the financial reporting in advance, for example? David, that is your special field.
Yeah, but I think that actually is more on what we can do or not do within Sigma. And I think this is not possible, if I'm not mistaken. It's linked to the reporting periods. You can consult the guidance on the wizard, which the calculations and how the wizard works are detailed and explained. But I think, unless I'm wrong, Peter, that there is no possibility to use the wizard outside the reporting period or even outside Sigma itself, because that we also wanted for ourselves to do our trials, and it's really linked to the reports, and as it is designed, it's not possible to use it outside.
Yeah, but maybe we can add that this is really a technical restriction. It's not because we do not want to, it's because for the moment, technically, there is no easy way to implement this. At the same time, we started preparing a personnel cost wizard for Horizon Europe, or to say it even more generally, for the corporate grant agreement in the current funding period, and we will take up this observation and see what we can do for Horizon Europe. Okay, next question, please. If an interim report is from 1st of September 2020 until 28th of February 22, do I use the 2021 last closed financial year staff rates for the full period of this report? David, please.
No, it's just for assuming that your financial year matches the calendar year, so 1st of January to 31st of December. In that case, you will have to use the hourly rate of 2021 also, so for 2021, and also for January and February 2022. But for the period going from 1st September 2020 until December 2020, you will use the hourly rate 2020. And for 2021, the one for 2021. So it's just these extra months that run from the end of your previous financial year until the end of the reporting period, for which you have to use the same hourly rate that the one of the last closed financial year. And here is, as well, I say, a big difference with Horizon Europe. In Horizon Europe, we will take, in your example, from 1st September 2020 until 28th February 2022, to calculate a single daily rate that will apply to all the time that the person worked over the reporting period. But I insist, this Horizon Europe is not yet, we are not yet there, at least for the purpose of this webinar. And here you will use the last closed financial year 2021, also for January and February 2022, but not for 2020.
Okay, very clear. Next question. What records and other supporting documentation would I need to prove the management costs in an Marie Skłodowska-Curie RISE action. And are we so specialized that we can?
I'm not expert on that, but the management costs are linked to the unit cost for the researcher, so the monthly allowances. So for sure, you need to keep supporting documents justifying the employment contract or the period of secondment, these RISE actions for secondment. Please, what I would suggest is that you check this in the annotated model grant agreement that we send the link or we show the link during the presentation. And if you have any doubts on that, you can consult us through the Research Inquiry Service, because then the question will be treated by the experts on Maria Skłodowska-Curie actions.
Maybe one addition to this, in the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, the whole funding is based on unit costs. And the driver for this unit cost is the person months for the researcher who actually gets the fellowship. So as far as I remember, also the other costs, including other allowances and management, are driven by the researcher months. So the main thing you have to prove when an auditor comes is that the researcher actually worked for these months on the project. Okay, next question. Bonuses based on the overall financial performance of the organization shall be the same for all employees or can be different for each category. Page 49, AGA.
Perhaps Sorin wants to complement with real life examples, but they do not need to be the same. What we need to see is that they are based on objective conditions, so that if you have a different calculation of the bonus for managers than for researchers and for technicians, okay, that's fine. If this is your usual remuneration practices, if it is documented and if it is objective, objective meaning that it's not the boss that in the morning when wakes up decides, so we will distribute 20% of the operational profit just to the managers. No, we need something settled, established in writing, upon which these bonuses are calculated. Then if the bonus has a different calculation, as I say, for different types of categories of staff, that in itself is not a problem. I don't know, sorry, if you have any example or practical experience from the audit perspective. If not, we'll let it be there.
Maybe just to add that indeed there shouldn't be, these bonuses should not be arbitrary. They should be based on objective criteria, which are applied across the organization based on objective criteria, like David said as well. If it's a different category but already set up beforehand, this is what I would say from practice. Thank you. Okay.
Next, please. If a researcher starts working on the project in July, can he report 1720 divided by 2, meaning 860 hours for the year concerned?
For me, the question has not all necessary information. In principle, okay, yes, you will. If the researcher started on 1st of July, of course, it's not 1720. You just have half of the year, so your annual productive hours are not going to be 1720, but half of it. If this is the question, that's fine. Then about declaring, well, you will declare the number of hours that the person actually worked. It's not because he was hired in July that you will charge to the action automatically 860 hours. You keep trace every month of the number of hours worked, and you at the end declare this number with the limit of 860 in this example.
Okay, clear. Next question, please. Can a budget category be reallocated from subcon? Oh, we had this one, I think. Okay, it comes back. So we go immediately to the next one. The hours declared, do they have to be within the working hours, or could it be weekends or after work hours? David.
Okay, in practice, it depends on the contract and the national legislations. If one of the requirements is that whatever you declare, one of the eligibility conditions is that whatever you declare must be in line with your national law. I'm simplifying, but with the national law, in social law, labor law, and fiscal law. So obviously, if in accordance with my contract, I'm not supposed to work on the weekends, we don't expect you to see declaring hours on weekends, because you are doing something which is illegal, if you want, from the perspective of the labor legislation. Now, if normally the person can do, for instance, overtime and work, I don't know, after 10 in the evening, if this is possible, legally speaking, and this is the reality, you can, of course, also include those hours. So to your question is, first of all, it depends on what is legally possible for us working for this person. And if it is legally possible and it's their reality, then you can declare it.
I would just add maybe also on the work, the hours which are worked in addition to what we call overtime in practice, yeah, that this should be also taken into account. So if you have procedures regarding overtime, which is paid, and also should be taken into account in the hourly rate, in the upper part, but also in the productive hours calculation, in the down part of the calculation of the hourly rate as well. So, and also to take into account, please, in the check of the double ceiling, when we check the personnel cost condition regarding the double ceiling. Thank you.
Okay, next question, please. Can costs for consultants be put in the item of other direct costs? For instance, contracts for purchasing goods, works or service necessary for the project tasks. Consultants, costs for consultants.
There might be cases in which you have seen during the presentation that the consultants, which are typically or often qualifying within the category of personal costs with contracts that are not employment, direct contracts that are not employment contracts. But this is subject to some conditions, as you have seen, for example, that the person must work under conditions similar to those of an employee. So there will be cases in which actually the contractual relation with the person does not fulfill the eligibility conditions to qualify under this category, Article 62A2. And then it will go into a different category, either subcontracting, if the person is actually doing on her own or his own a specific task or part of a specific task of the action. And occasionally it might also go into purchase of services when we are speaking of a global contract that is not with the person, that is not specifically to do task in the actions, but that you need the work of this person for you to carry on or implement these action tasks. So it's possible. It really depends on what are the specificities of the contract and the factual conditions under which this person works, in particular if they are indeed similar to those of one of your employees or if they are different.
If I can quickly complement on this one.
Sorry.
Thank you. So what we see in practice from an audit perspective is that you really have to pay particular attention to this kind of question and already anticipate, even in the moment of budgeting, the cost. If you see it's it's a direct contract, then you have to comply with these rules. If you go to a company and to a legal relationship with a company, then to pay attention, because subcontracting costs should be foreseen in the Annex 1 well beforehand. There is no indirect cost to be foreseen as well. And also the other direct cost, and of course you should ensure best value for money procurement as well. So it goes well beyond. So if you really have better how do you plan to implement the project. So if you have such cases, please pay attention and try to anticipate it, and because there are different paths afterwards, and there are financial implications as well, and procedural ones as well regarding the best value and so on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Is there an average salary table per country we can use as a reference to identify if a project is using higher than average salaries that it is entitled to?
It's a bit surprising as a question, because actually we don't fix ceilings. It's true one eligibility condition or among the eligibility conditions for the cost is that the cost must not be excessive, must not be reckless, and must be necessary for implementing the action tasks. Now we don't set ceilings. If you hire a Nobel Prize, probably she or he's gonna be quite expensive. So there is no this immediate table of ceilings or not absolute reference about the salaries. Obviously, if we find that you pay 10 times the salary of your other employees to one employee without no apparent reason and no possibility to justify and substantiate the reason why this person is paid at such a level, well, there might be cases, they are rare, but there might be cases in which we might adjust or reject part of those costs, but there is no reference. And as far as you remain in the normal logic of the labor market, you shouldn't be worried about that. So it's really for cases in which you are not able and there is no objective and reasonable justification for an excessive salary.
Okay, next question, please. What is the threshold for exceeding person months per work package? It was planned 5 person months. Can we report 9 person months? Given the explanations that researchers worked instead of professor. You want to give it a start, David?
Yes, I thought that you will be even better placed than me for that. But yeah, when you are reporting, okay, person months, we report in the technical reports, okay? For the financial reports, we use hours. For the technical reports, we use person months, which at the end is converting the number of hours into person months. You need to declare the reality. So if you planned 5 person months and you use 9 or the other way around, you will declare the reality. In itself, it's not automatically a problem. What is going to happen is that, well, if the EU project officer sees, well, normally they planned 5 person months and they are declaring 10, well, we will ask questions. The project officer will say, well, explain me why this difference is something that is going wrong. It took longer than expected. You thought that you will have a genius doing the work and you needed 2 not so genius people to do it. So you will need to justify to give explanations and justify this difference. In itself, it's not a problem. For me, it would be a bigger problem if you hide any information. If you pretend that it was done in 5 person months and you probably in the cost declared 9 or 10 person months. This incompatibility of data could be problematic. It's certainly more problematic than having to justify why are the reasons for the deviation. Because on top, if there are technical research reasons that are causing or producing problems in the grant agreement, by knowing it, we can prepare an amendment, discuss with you to reorientate, readjust the work, do an amendment, modifying Annex 1. So it's very important on the side of the Commission also to know if there has been deviations, why this has happened, what are the reasons for, and if something has to be done about it.
I would maybe like to add one word of caution to all this. As David explains, this is not in the first instance a financial issue. It is about the substance of the projects and the judgment whether this is acceptable or not will be done by the project officers following the technical implementation of your project. We should also say that the main people involved in your projects are identified in your proposal, and the quality of these people is part of the scoring in the evaluation of your proposal. If you promise heaven in your proposal, in the sense that you will have some very high-level prominent researchers investing work in this project, and then finally it turns out that all the work is done by junior PhD students, there will be a problem. Because it would also mean that the competition to select your proposal would have been different if you had said the truth in the proposal. So be careful there. Normally we expect that the people who are mentioned as the main drivers of a project in your proposal, and these people are identified in person, as you know, in the proposal, that these people are also involved. And if they are finally not involved, you have to have very good justification why this is not the case. Okay, next question. Can the 13th month salary be included in the annual personnel costs? David.
I assume obviously that the 13-month salary is an entitlement of the person, of the employee, that comes from the employment contract most likely, or from the collective labor agreement. So if this is an entitlement that has to be paid to the person, it's part of the annual personnel cost, and you can of course include it into the pool of course that we will use to calculate the hourly rate of this person. Peter, you are muted, sorry.
Sorry, I was muted. So next question, we have beneficiaries calculating the hourly rates based on the fixed option, but using 1760 instead of 1720. Would you advise them to recalculate based on 1720? Sorry.
We explained it during the presentation that there are in fact three options there for the calculation of the annual productive hours. We very much promote 1720 because it's the simplest. There is no factual possibility of mistake with it, and you have no risk because the amount of hours is fixed. In some cases, you will have to calculate a pro rata of it, as we saw before with the example of the person starting in July, but there are very limited possibilities of mistake. But there are also two other options. The second is the individual annual productive hours. The third is the standard annual productive hours. In this example, I presume that these entities are using standard annual productive hours. This option is subject to conditions. First and foremost, that the beneficiary must have a usual accounting practices, a usual cost accounting practice to calculate the number of annual productive hours. And then there's a second about the 90%, but with 1680, I'm pretty sure that this is complied with. So it's not necessary that they recalculate, but the advice certainly is be sure that by using this 1680, you comply with the conditions of this option 3, standard annual productive hours. Probably they do, but this is the verification that they have to do. So 1720 is not mandatory, it's one option. The recommended one, the easiest, but it's just one option of the three.
Okay, next question, please. How does the double ceiling rule work if a person works for an ERC project as well as for an EU lump sum project like ERC POC? That is a tricky one, David.
Yes, can I ask someone else? No, I'm kidding. Yes, there is a difficulty because at the time of verification, because of course, when we are speaking about lump sum grants, you are not requested to keep supporting documents and keep trace, for instance, of the number of hours that the person worked on the lump sum project, because you don't declare hours. You just declare the lump sum shares for the work packages accomplished. Now, this does not mean that we don't pay attention at all at the lump sum grants. For instance, if we have a researcher that is supposed to work or that plays a prominent role, or is expected, as Peter explained, to play a prominent role in a lump sum grant, and then we find the same researcher declaring 1,700 hours in other grants, well, we will likely conclude that something is wrong there, that it is not possible for this person with a normal full-time employment contract to work so much into the lump sum project and also declare so much hours or so many hours into the actual cost projects. And there, we have not faced the situation yet, but certainly we'll have to do some kind of adjustment. So at least the advice is, again, remain truth, declare the reality of the number of hours into the actual cost grants, Certainly, you will comply with the rules if you do that, because the person will certainly not work more than their full-time employment number of hours or time that is supposed to work, adding up both the actual cost and the lump sum grants. So there is no 1 hour addition because it is not possible with the lump sum grants, but they will do verifications of consistency, reasonability of the time declared, when taking into account that the person also works in one or more lump sum grants.
Okay, next one, please. A researcher goes to a conference and presents 2 papers, one from H2020 and one from another project. How is the cost considered, 100 or 50%?
I wonder, sorry if there is any practical example, but because we have had this question in past, but it has been always rather theoretical. And of course, if any reasonable allocation of the hours, distribution of the hours, of the cost between our work for the part of the work that was for the Horizon 2020 grant and the part that it was for other projects, if the distribution is reasonable, I don't think that there would be a problem from an audit perspective. But sorry, anything to complement there?
So maybe what we see in practice is true that sometimes there are conferences which cover topics, and obviously a researcher which is specialized in a topic in particular may work on several grants in parallel. So what we see in practice as best practice, I would say, is that they really try to separate the cost to the extent possible. And here, for example, we are talking about the travel cost. So if there is a travel, there are some conference fees or there are some costs declared for that travel. And if the results or because we also request some proof of the reason of the travel, and we also look at the conferences and the meetings mentioned in the project, in the technical report and so on, try to make the links, of course, and cross-check. But if we see that one travel had double or multiple purpose, not only for the project, we do ask the beneficiary to justify how they claim the cost. And in the example given, most probably if they split it in 2 because they consider that they presented for 2 projects, we will consider it reasonable to accept the cost in 2. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, rather clear. Next one. What about claiming for student costs? Do they come under personnel?
Okay, so the first remark there is that is not forbidden, and it's possible under some conditions to declare cost of students into Horizon 2020 grants. First, and for me perhaps the most important reference there, for doing so, the contract or the document that you use to justify the relation between you and the student and covering the work in the action must be work-oriented. So whether it is a contract in itself or a scholarship or other type of contractual relations, it must be work-oriented. If you are paying a scholarship for the person to be trained, we will say, well, you are not paying for work, so we don't pay for the student. And in that specific case, the cost will not be eligible. Now, if the contract with the person, with the student, is work-oriented, then yes, you may charge costs, and typically they fall under this category 6282, that are costs for natural persons working under a direct contract other than an employment contract. I say typically because, well, you are expected to verify that in any case the contractual relation fulfills the conditions of this category, but typically they fall under it. So important point, verify that actually you are paying this person, this student, for work, not as a allowance or scholarship for the person to study or train.
Maybe,
yes.
Maybe just to add quickly also that what we can see in practice also is that we may adjust, for example, the cost because the cost was charged in full, although part of the contract was foreseeing training, for example, and part of it work, or also the time sheets and so on. So yeah, please pay attention to this part of training and only relate to work, given the fact that the research project, that the people that are working in the research project should normally have the necessary knowledge to work for it.
Yeah, so thank you, because that brings to my mind the story of PhD students. So typically, we already say in the annotated model grant agreement that PhDs are considered as work-oriented. It doesn't mean that automatically you can charge all the costs of the PhD, because typically they do something else. I have had several times this remark or this question during webinar saying, well, but we hired the PhD and the research project of this PhD is indeed the work in the Horizon 2020 action. But then when we asked, we realized that the PhD on top collaborates, for instance, in teaching activities. Okay, and then we say, well, okay, fine, it might be that the person was hired with intention to work in the research action, but also has other activities and potentially likely even training for the PhD herself or himself. That part of the time of the PhD can never be charged to us. It's the working time in the action that can be charged. Thanks.
Okay, next question, please. So it says out of scope, but I read it still. Can the project coordinator force a project partner to pay other direct costs budgeted for work packages in scope of another project partner?
The only thing that comes to my mind is that whatever internal arrangements, that depends on what it is in the consortium agreement. We are not part of the consortium agreement. So this kind of internal agreements about what can be done or not be, typically is something that is to be stipulated into the consortium agreement. So we don't enter into what the different members of the consortium agreed among themselves.
Okay, next one.
Maybe just add is that the cost that will be incurred by the beneficiary should be incurred for the beneficiary and not for some other beneficiary. And so we will pay, let's say, attention during an ex post check that the costs that are claimed by the beneficiary are really incurred by the beneficiary himself as well, and there is no other costs transferred and so on. So to the extent possible to avoid such type of cost. Thank you.
Yeah, may I? Because I was thinking now, indeed, in some cases we have seen this, that one beneficiary buying things on behalf of other beneficiary. This is obviously with a very, very set of specific exceptions. This is, as Sorin explained it, not the right thing to do. The typical example of a reason is that not all beneficiaries have systematically the same funding rate, for instance. Right, so it's not the first time that we see that a beneficiary with funding rate 100% says, "Well, I will buy everything and then I will recover, I will charge 100%." And also for consumables that a beneficiary at 70% will receive later. So that's not the way. As Sorin explained, each beneficiary has to incur and declare its own costs. Thanks.
Okay, next question. I think you had a similar one already, but maybe we come back to this one. The bonus is based on the overall financial performance of the organization, not an arbitrary decision, but can the amount be different for each employee, which would be an arbitrary decision? That's how I understand it.
Basically, and coming back to the rule of thumb, which is also a legal obligation, is that whatever is arbitrary, we cannot accept. It must be in all cases based on objective conditions. You might have to say that, okay, in my internal remuneration rules, I have 20 employees and the percentage of the bonus that they will get is different for each beneficiary. Oh, sorry, for each one of these persons. Fine. You will have at the end a different bonus for each person, but it's already defined ex ante. So before, in a documented process or practice, where it's already established how the amount to be received by each person and under which conditions is established, as I say, ex ante, so before it is paid. If it is something that is decided at the end of the year or any of the moment at the level of the direction or the director of the company or whatever, but it's something that is cannot be supported by these documented remuneration practices, I'm afraid I would have to say that it's arbitrary and not eligible.
Okay, next question, please. Which public holidays should be non-workable? Belgian ones, meaning the contractor country, or those applicable in the country of residence of each consultant? Sorin, is this more for you, or?
I can give it a try. Maybe first to see if I understand it well, the question, because it starts with public holidays, but then it arrives to residence of the consultant. So there are maybe several questions within the question. So first of all, the public holidays to be taken into account are those defined in the member state or in the country in which the entity that we are auditing, the auditee, let's call it this way, or the beneficiary, has the residence. So it will be in accordance with the applicable national law, typically defined or let's say published nationally. Now, so this is applicable for all the personnel working for the beneficiary. If there are persons, and here I'm referring most probably to natural persons working for the beneficiary, normally a natural person working for a Belgian beneficiary will normally be established in Belgium. If it is established in another country, then I would say, but here I also would like confirmation from a legal perspective, that normally his employment contract should apply according to the national rules of the country in question, where according to his employment contract. But a Belgian employment contract with some other, okay, it could be even more complicated with, let's say, subsidiaries in other countries. So I don't want to complicate it further, but I would say normally we should look at the legal, the work contract of the person. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. I'm just still trying to figure out the relevance of this. If it is about, well, declaring hours and days that are not workable, this is something that happens very rarely. I hope you don't have 30 or 40 non-workable public holidays in whatever country. So I don't think it's something extremely, very extremely sensitive issue. So for me, I'm perfectly fine with what Sorin explained.
Okay. We go to the next one. A researcher associated with our institution travels for our project. Do we have to ask him the timesheet fill in at the institution to which she belongs? Did you understand it, David?
No, I'm not sure, and I'm wondering if this has to do with seconded staff. This is the shortcoming of the online events, that we cannot immediately ask the person, well, are you referring to seconded staff?
Maybe I can.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, it sounds to me like it's maybe due to a person which does not work for the institution at all, does not declare any personal cost, if this is the case. Does not declare personal cost at all for the institution, but travels on behalf of the institution, if this is the case, and would like to declare this cost for the institution. This, I think, it's clarified in this expert participation. It's very could be assimilated, let's say, to expert participation. So I would say that if the question, one second, if the cost to be supported are the travel costs, then there is no need as such to provide timesheets. If it is only for the travel cost. So for the travel cost, it will be basically the hotel invoice, the travel, the airplane tickets, and all the rest, but not the timesheets as such, if this is the question. But indeed, it could be confusing as well, because if we're talking about some secondment between one institution to the other, then indeed, if personal costs are declared, there should be timesheets for sure.
Well, that's exactly so. That's a tricky issue. For the travelers, I don't think there is big problem because, as you explained it, we have these explanations in the annotated grant agreement for experts and what are the requirements to charge travels of experts. So people who is not working for the beneficiary, just to make it simple. But another story is if the beneficiary wants to charge whatever type of cost for the work, so to say, of this expert. And there, indeed, we will need to know more details about if it is a secondment, if it is really a consultant, if it is completely external. And in some cases, there will be need of timesheets, in particular, if eventually the costs are to be declared under personal costs. And if they are not under personal costs, well, then we will go into invoices. So pay the purchase of services or subcontracting, depending on the case.
Just to add on this as well, also that in case it is only the travel cost assimilated to experts travel, this should be foreseen normally in the Annex 1. So please be prudent on that aspect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question. The company was restructured and the people initially assigned were replaced with a different cost. How should we proceed now in the calculation of costs? David, I think the reply is straightforward.
See, the calculation of costs is with the new one. Said you need to work with the reality. Remember always, whatever you put in the budget is an estimation of cost. This is not what you have to declare. You have to declare the reality. So whether the new employees or the new structure of the company results in higher or lower salaries or more or less time necessary to carry out the work, you will have to declare the reality. So you will take now the salaries of these new employees or under the restructured company, calculate their hourly rates and then their personal costs. So you work on the reality. Whatever you put into the budget, it was an estimation. If it has an impact, as we discussed it before, on the technical reports, because now you need more or less person months, well, you explained there the reasons why, potentially including here, well, the company was restructured and the same people is no longer there. And I would say, as Peter explained it also, that if this implies that key personnel that was already named in the proposal and potentially also appears in the Annex 1 as being those who would carry out the work at the beneficiary are no longer there and are being replaced by others, that would be something quite important to report to the EU granting authority in the periodic reports, or even if it is very, very important change earlier to the project officer.
Thank you. Next question, please. In the example that you officially work 7.5 hours per day, you will divide. This will change the annual hours rate from 1720 annual work.
No, if you go to option 1, 1720, 1720, that's the beauty of the option, that it doesn't change. In fact, it changes if there is a pro rata to be calculated. I insist, if I'm a part-time worker and I work 50% of my time, so under the contract, so of course I will calculate a pro rata. If I started in July, I will calculate a pro rata, but otherwise it's 1720. So whether your normal working hours are 7.5 or 8.5, you keep 1720. I insist, you have other options. You have the individual, and then you will take into account the real time worked by the person. You have the standard, but if you go into the simplest option, the 1720 for a full-time employee working during the whole year.
Okay, we are reaching the official end of the meeting, but because we had these technical problems, and we also see there is still quite some interest, many people still following us and some questions left. My suggestion is that we continue for another 15 minutes. That seems to be okay also for the other speakers. So let's simply do this. Go through to the next question. A researcher traveling for the project does not allocate hours in timesheet projects. The costs, are these costs eligible?
Well, if it is for the travel itself, you may be eligible indeed. If it is for the personal cost, you need the timesheets, you need the justification of the hours. And by the way, going down into this, we have had several times the question of how, well, the person is working for the action. How many hours can I declare? Also with the proposal of declaring 24 hours per day. So the simple reply to that question is that we will accept the same that you accept under your normal practices. So for instance, now we don't travel that much, but when we traveled, 1 day in travel was considered 8 hours of work internally. So that was the policy, or that is still the policy here, for instance, in the institutions. So if you treat your personnel the same way, saying, well, when you travel for the company, we consider and we pay you a 1 day of work, regardless of actually where you were or how many hours you were traveling and how many working, the same will apply for us. So it's rather simple. You will charge to us for the travel the same number of, or you may charge the same number of hours that you accept internally. But yes, we will need, if it is for personal costs, we will need the time records.
Just to mention.
Yes, sorry, please.
Yeah, just to mention quickly also an additional, I think, important point is that if you claim personal cost, please be careful that we also, when we look at the time recording system, the liability of the time recording system, we also go usually further to look at the travels to ensure consistency and cross-checking with the timesheets and the travel dates and so on. So I would, especially when you claim personal cost, yes, normally the hours that you claimed for the project, for the travel should also be in your timesheet. If not, you will have questions from the auditor asking, but why you didn't put, or is this the only time, or are the timesheets really reliable? So I would pay particular attention to this aspect. Thank you.
You may remember, perhaps, sorry, we had a case of one person who were sharing for 1 day of travel to a conference, scheduled 8 hours to 3 different EU projects. And the argument of this person was that he was multitask and was thinking all the day and night in the projects and doing nothing else. You may imagine that we couldn't accept such approach.
Yeah, just to add, one could also understand the question in a different sense, meaning that there is somebody for whom you actually do not charge personnel costs. You don't charge hours to the project, but that person still travels for the purpose of the project. And I think in principle, the reply to the question whether the travel costs and the costs related to this travel can be charged, in principle, it is yes. But of course, only if the person travels for the purpose of the project.
Yes.
This is perfectly imaginable. We have many cases where professors are paid by the state and you don't charge the costs of the professor, but the professor still travels to present the results of the projects in conference. So in principle, yes.
Yes, absolutely. The only thing, because we had also this question in past, is well, it is in those cases it's recommendable to put something in the technical report, saying that X person was working and traveled for the action, just to avoid that in case of an audit, the auditor starts saying, well, who is this person? I don't have timesheets for this person. I don't have nothing in the financial reports. If there's already a mention in the technical reports, it will be much easier to justify the participation of the person.
Okay, next one, please. Is it accepted to sign the timesheets by facsimile, scan of a sign?
Sorin will compliment me later if you want for the practical part. But look, we expect either blue ink signatures, or if you have an electronic time recording system, well, then electronic signatures. But the scan, if it goes through the computer, is not an electronic signature. So it doesn't provide any reliability. I could have a scan of Peter's signature and start signing checks on his behalf. So that any one of you, I think, can understand that this is not something that provides any assurance on the reliability of the time records.
Yeah, I would just mention that indeed, okay, during the pandemic situation, there were some frequent asked questions and some clarification that indeed, during that period, there could be some temporary measures put in place, but for an audit, and sorry, not only for an audit, we will expect that you regularize the situation as soon as possible and have really only blue ink or the electronic signature.
Indeed, and thanks, sorry for recalling that. Indeed, but even there we have at least a minimum set of requirements. For instance, okay, you sign your own time records for the COVID when there was the confinement, and you send it by email to your boss, and the boss replies by email saying, "I agree with them." Okay, it's not a signature, but my email normally is private. I have my password, so nobody else is supposed to use my email. So that gave some reliability, even if the procedure didn't require at that moment blue ink, that gave some reliability on what was being declared, because there was a confirmation through a email account, at least, for example, in this case, which normally is personal and protected by a password. So we don't expect anyone else, like in the case of the facsimile, using the same thing.
I think there is also a section in the annotated grant agreement explaining in detail what electronic signature means in our case and what are the minimum conditions to be fulfilled. Okay, next one, please. What are the acceptable ways to show best value when purchasing service or equipment? What do we need to demonstrate that is ensured? Sorin, I know that you are an expert on this.
Let's say I'm an expert. So for best value for money, to make it simple, because I mean, what we have in our, you may go further in the indicative audit program to see what are the checks that are supposed to be done by an auditor. There are two types of checks for entities that are considered contracting authorities. The the requirements, sorry, are a little bit different. They are coming from the directive, so you will find there more details. And for the other ones, basically, so to summarize, to ensure best value for money is that, first of all, you should have, I mean, the auditor will look to see whether you have a procurement procedure or not in place. If you do have a procurement procedure, they would like to understand it, first of all, to obtain it as a document, but also to go through and see how you used your procurement procedure to ensure best value for money in the project. Meaning, did you publish, so first of all, to see what is foreseen in the procurement procedure, and then to see how your procurement procedure in practice ensures best value for money. Meaning, did you publish your procedure? Where did you receive several offers? Did you? What is your way to select these offers? You may have some technical assessments as well, not only the financial part and so on. So we really go through in the process, usually with the procurement department, and we see we receive some proofs of how the selection has been done in reality. So what are acceptable ways? Yes, I would say, first of all, the procurement procedure that you have in place, the steps that you followed, the supporting evidence that you can provide to the auditor for the steps that you followed, meaning the letter where you published, the description of the work to be done, the offers you received as well, the panel that analyzed as well the offers received and the decision of this panel or committee. And then finally, we'll see this normally will ensure the best value for money. In case you don't have a procurement procedure in place, then I mean, the grant requires you to somehow fulfill the best value for money. So what we would expect as a minimum, I would say, but I'm under the control of a legal perspective as well, is that you would try to ensure best value for money. So require several offers, at least 3, I would say, as a best practice. But even more, publish it also somewhere, require it publicly, and then receive offers and then compare them, and obviously keep only the most interesting one. I would say that I would add, as a general context for this question, is that this is public money. You are expected to spend it wisely and in a most efficient way and economic way. So yeah, this is what the auditor will look at. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question, please. Is it possible for a researcher to certify person months in the action without certifying costs in H2020 if she is in another project with European funds? I assume certifying means claiming costs, or yeah. David.
Not sure, Peter, because person months, as we say, is refers really to the technical report. So I'm wondering if the idea is if we can declare, if they can declare person months for a person for which they don't charge any cost. You see, because the question goes for a researcher to certify without certifying cost. So I assume, I understand it refers to declare person months for somebody for whom we don't, or they don't charge the cost. Yes, this is not a problem. And in fact, I insist, if you do so, if it happens, if somebody is working in the action, but you don't charge personnel costs for this person, I would say even that you should indicate this in the use of resources and the number of person months invested. First of all, because probably this was already expected at the beginning of the action. So if you don't declare now these person months, they might create a deviation, a discrepancy with the number of person months initially foreseen in the proposal and in Annex 1 for a specific task or work package. So I would say that it's not just possible, it's that it is advisable to do so.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Is the number of 720 hours to be considered as a maximum limit for the individual annual productive hours option, as well as for the standard productive hours option?
No, for the standard productive hours option depends on the usual practice of the entity. So the 1720 is the limit for option 1, because we will calculate an hourly rate. You will calculate an hourly rate using 1720, so dividing the annual personnel cost by 1720. So the ceiling is fixed. I insist that there are cases of pro rata because part-time or because the person didn't work the full year. But if you are into the standard annual productive hours, you will use your own usual cost accounting practice, provided it complies with the conditions of this option 3. And this usual cost accounting practice may be that instead of 1720 is 1800. And then you will calculate the hourly rate by dividing the personnel cost by 1800, and your limit will be 1800. This is very unusual, of course, because typically if a beneficiary has 1800, it chooses 1720 because it slightly increases the hourly rate. And 1720 is an option open to everyone, differently than option 3, for which there are conditions. So I'll summarize: 1720 is the limit for the option 1. And in option 3, as in option 2, it depends on the specific calculation. The limit is going to be what you use as annual productive hours to calculate the hourly rates.
Yes, maybe just for the purpose of illustration, the example that David just mentioned, if you charge the full personnel costs of a person to the project, it doesn't matter which option you choose. In the 1720 option, the limit for charging is 1720, but the hourly rate will be a bit higher. In the 1800 option, you can charge 1800 hours, but the hourly rate will be a bit lower, and the final result will be exactly the same. You charge not more than the actual full personnel costs of the person. Of course, it's different for people working only partially on the project. Okay, I suggest one more question and then we really have to wrap up. An employee working only 1660 hours in the year, can I use the formula of 1720? I think what we just said gives the reply, but we can make it even clearer, David.
Yes, of course you can use 1720. I insist the 1720 option is open to everyone. So you use 1720 for the calculation of the hourly rates, and there the calculation and the 1720 would be disconnected for the calculation of the hourly rate of the number of hours that the person is supposed to work. So it might be in this case 1660, in other cases 1800. These are typical differences that we encounter. So it has, if you go to option 1, it's 1720, regardless of the number of hours that the person is actually supposed to work, a person working full-time during the full year. It would be 1720.
Okay, so I think we have to stop here now. We still have a few questions left. We will, of course, download them from Slido and analyze them and use them in further sharpening all our guidance. Thank you very much again for this interesting webinar and for your patience, and apologies again for the technical issues at the very beginning. We are having a brand new TV studio here, and these are teething problems that we hope will be overcome very soon. So thanks again, and have a nice lunch break, I would say. Thank you very much.